Right, today I've come to Arbor Low Stone Circle, often called the North's answer to Stonehenge. And like all things that are the X's answer to Y, it's smaller and less impressive. So the frustrating thing about the Arbor Low Stone Circle is probably one of the things that attracts many people to it. It's set in a huge, wide open plain, just fields as far as the eye can see and low stone walls. And you know what a huge open environment creates? Wind noise! Lots of it! So, first hurdle that I had to come across is realising that I couldn't record anything on site. Second thing is that when I got back home, I kind of realised I didn't have that much to say about this place. Right, there it is up on the hill there. And we're gonna walk to it. So let's get down to Arbor Low Stone Circle facts. It was first developed as a site about 2500 BC and was abandoned around 1000 AD, around the time of the Bronze Age in Britain. It consists of about 41, 42, 43 stones. The site may have had about 50 originally, and they've been dragged away. It's very likely that they were raised up, but they were in quite shallow sounding, so they are all now collapsed. The name Arbor Low comes from Old English Earthbergleur, which became Arbor Low. Pronunciation notwithstanding, I am not an Anglo-Saxon scholar, unfortunately. One of the things that's really frustrating about the Arbor Low Stone Circle is that it's not really been investigated significantly in the 20th or 21st centuries. A lot of the archaeological techniques and evidence analysis that we would do nowadays hasn't been done on the Arbor Low Stone Circle, and there isn't significant interest. Modern scholarly work on the subject tends to have to rely on Victorian field work, and that's unfortunately not very reliable and wasn't done in very modern methods. So it's difficult to make concrete decisions about the place. Despite being smaller and less impressive than Stonehenge, this is still a very impressive piece of Neolithic engineering in its own right. These are big stones, about the size of the ones at Avebury, and although they have fallen over, they still represent remarkable craftsmanship for Neolithic peoples. I'm sat down in a ditch that's been dug as part of the earthworks of this site. And it's pretty deep, and this is not even as deep as it would have originally been. This site was used for about 1,000 years, from around 2,500 BC to around 1,500 BC, between the late Neolithic and the early Bronze Age, which is remarkably good going for a monument of this type. And the last aspects of it were built during the Bronze Age. New ditches were dug to further augment the site. And anything that has 1,000 years of history to it, as you can imagine, had varying practices, just as churches in England went from masses in Old English to Latin, back to Middle English, and then eventually to Modern English, and changed with the times, with Catholic and Protestant thought. So we can imagine the religion and culture would have changed around this relatively unchanging site, modified slightly from time to time to suit the new needs of whatever new faith had emerged. The Arbor Low site is exceptionally well loved by the people of the Peak District and the people who have holidayed there. It was first given special protection in 1848, and there are still marker stones that you can find around the site signifying its royal protection, with VR and GR for Victoria and George, respectively. It then passed into the Department of Antiquities, which was part of the government, and is now managed by the heritage charity the English Heritage. The site lies on private land, so the English Heritage own the site, but the field all around it is owned by a private individual due to the complex way by which it entered public ownership. This means that the farm that has the site asks for a nominal £1 fee to access, just because you're going through their land, you're disturbing their livestock, and you're probably parking there as well, unless you want to go all the way across the hills to get there, which is perfectly reasonable, but it's a long walk, so I don't think £1 to entry is particularly onerous, especially because it's just an honesty box. Just pop a quid in the box and go on in. I feel a bit cruel to the site, calling it the smaller and less impressive Stonehenge, but that is unfortunately the case. It is, on its own merits, quite interesting, and it's in a beautiful location. You can't fault the location for a trip, for a walk out in the countryside, or just a place to stop as you're crossing the Peak District. It's wonderful. It's perfect. But if you are trying to make a video for YouTube about the historical interest of the site, it's difficult to film that, and there isn't a lot to say.